Hello everybody, welcome to episode 20 of the Aviation Spotters Podcast. I am your host, Colin Moser. Guys, I hope you enjoyed last week's discussion with Pete Schneider. What a wealth of stories that guy has, and just his amazing stories in Switzerland at Axalp. And I really hope you guys enjoyed listening to him. He has been supporting me since day one. He's given me a lot of feedback on how to improve this podcast. And thank you, Pete, for coming on. I thank you so much for taking the time with your kids to come on the show and talk with me here on the Aviation Spotters Podcast. Well, as I promised you guys last week, we have quite a big guest for episode 20. For just a kind of a little brief overview on who this is, if you don't know already with the title. My guest this week has been published with his photos in not just magazines, but major news networks such as CNN, Fox News, NBC, and Good Morning America. You guys have also might have seen his photos when Southwest Airlines shared his absolutely stunning of Captain Ted Orsted's last flight in a Southwest 737 departing from Raleigh-Durham. He was in a helicopter above Captain Orsted's final departure out of Raleigh-Durham, and I know all you guys have seen his amazing air-to-ground photography, so it is my honor to welcome on to episode 20 of the Aviation Spotters Podcast from Washington, D.C., Mr. Ryan Patterson. Ryan, good evening. How are you doing?
Good evening. I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I cannot thank you enough for agreeing to do this with me. A lot of people actually have, believe it or not, have actually come and emailed me and messaged me trying to get you on the show. And I think you have an amazing story, and not just an amazing story to tell, but obviously some amazing stories to tell. But I think it'll be nice to have the listener get to know you a little more on a personal level. So
yeah, definitely.
Thank you again for coming on, but let's get to know you a little bit. So where are you from, and how you got into aviation photography and just aviation in general?
Yeah, so I was born, I'm 21 years old, so born in 1999 in San Francisco, California, just south of San Francisco. I've been into aviation for really as long as I can remember. My family was always big into traveling, and when I was little, my parents, my dad in particular, would take me up to San Francisco, and we'd sit at Bayfront Park for hours just watching the airplanes, watching the United 747s come and go on their Asia runs. And that's really what got me into aviation photography. My dad had a camera. It wasn't anything fancy, and we used to take pictures. And then my grandmother unfortunately passed away when I was 6 years old, and she had a little 2-megapixel point and shoot camera that she left for me, and that's where the aviation photography started. And I think we had, it was a 20 slot card, so with 2-megapixel photos. I mean, it was a tiny memory card, but I would take 20 or so photos and on my trips and stuff, and save them. And that's where the aviation photography started. And then when I was 13, I got my first camera for my birthday, and I guess the story from there kind of tells itself.
That's awesome how your grandmother left you that camera. I think she knew that one day you would make it big and you would be doing great things, and she is absolutely right about that. Real quick, we mentioned the air-to-ground stuff, so let's just jump into that real quick. So what made you want to get into the air-to-ground stuff and like sitting in the helicopters and stuff and getting a different perspective on taking photos like that?
Yeah, so when I was probably 15, I started looking at the photos on Airliners Net. I really didn't find anyone else when I was younger that enjoyed aviation in the same way I did. And so when I started getting into the internet a little bit more, having more access to it, I started looking at pages like Airliners Net and photos from photographers like Sam Chewy. They captured me, and I fell in love with the aerial perspective. and inspired me to go out and take my own. And I tried when I was 16, so it was 2016. My dad and I decided to go out to LAX and do the Star Helicopters helicopter flight over LAX, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I knew there was something special there, and I felt so natural in the air that the photos came out exactly how I wanted them to. And it kind of stayed stagnant for a while. I went back to LAX, I think, the next year, since I just loved it so much, and started saving my money. I worked a summer job as a lifeguard at the local pool, and all my money that summer went to doing one more helicopter, and it kind of built on itself from there.
Awesome. And obviously it's turned into something amazing. I think that LAX helicopter stuff is on a bucket list for a lot of other people. But you've done multiple things, not just at LAX, but like Raleigh, Durham, and a lot of other oddball airports where you wouldn't think. The one that I think of, and I think that the first photo I really saw from you is the one in, I'm probably going to butcher this, but Tupelo, Mississippi.
Tupelo, yep.
With the United 747s. And that was one of my favorite photos you've ever taken. This because the United had that event, what was it? It was the Night with the Queens or whatever?
It was the dinner under the 747.
Yeah, and just seeing those aircraft like that, and I had a completely different perspective. And you were in a helicopter for that, or were you using a drone?
Yeah, so we actually got a drone approved for that. So that was, funny enough, that was my first ever professional job, and that was kind of where things started really steamrolling. I'd been into aerial photography for about a year and a half at that point. I'd done, I think, 3 helicopters, and all of them had been at LAX, and United had invited me to be their photographer. We had talked about doing a shoot together for a long time, and they invited me to do a shoot. It was not paid or anything, but it was my first professional shoot where we signed a contract and everything. And they invited me over, which was a special event for me because it was saying goodbye to the 747s, which I sadly wasn't able to get on the very last flight due to being in school. But being able to say goodbye to the 747s under the wing, eating dinner and stuff, and then getting permission to fly the drone, which took a lot of work. As you can imagine, flying a drone in an airport, it's not something you can just walk up and do. You gotta get FAA permission. We got to talk to the board of the airport, and then have to go through the drone manufacturer to make sure that it was okay to do, which took a lot of work. But I think the photos came out really, really well.
Well, they came out amazingly. I mean, when people hear your name or your handle or whatever, people talk about are those drone shots, because I didn't realize you had to go through the drone manufacturer to even get permission to do that.
Yeah, so we had to go through DJI and get they have a safe lock, which is a really great mechanism, so not anyone can fly the drone at the airport, which I totally support, and it adds another layer of protection, but it also makes it more difficult to get it unlocked, so we had to prove to them with written consent that we were flying the drone safely at the airport, and that someone would be with me at all times to make sure we were acting safely.
Interesting. Well, that's very cool. So that is a good thing to know, that just some random can't bring a drone to LAX and fly it on the flight line. Then that's good to know. Very good to know. But man, that's awesome. I mean, I flew down to San Francisco. Like, my listeners know about the story, but I flew down to San Francisco in 2017 to be a part of the last flight. I wasn't able to get on the aircraft itself, unfortunately, but one of our really good family friends, who's a 35-year flight attendant now for United, just got off a red eye, so she was kind of walking me around and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm assuming, you being born in the Bay Area in San Francisco specifically, you already kind of have a very special place in the heart for the 747, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I love the 747. It's definitely my favorite. It holds a special place. So it was sad to see her depart, but it was cool to be able to say goodbye. That's for sure.
That was my first time ever spotting at SFO that day, and I think I picked the right day to do it.
Oh, being able to say goodbye to the Queen, it does not get better than that.
No, and I was actually at the factory up in Payne Field in December of 2017 for the Delta one. And my friend of mine, who's actually on the show, Jeremy Dwyer Lindgren, was on that flight. He flew from Detroit to Payne Field. Like, they flew the 747 back into the factory where it was born, which is absolutely unheard of to do. They all get off, and then they all get back. They do the factory tour, get on the airplane, and then they have a ferry flight to Seattle. Everybody thought it was going to go over to the Olympic Peninsula, be a nice scenic flight. No, they just went direct. And that was really cool to be a part of both farewell 747s and to see a Delta 47 land back at Payne Field, returning home one last time. And that was, I think that was, that at the time, that was the last 747 in civil service in the United States. Mainline passenger service, excluding Atlas. So I'm assuming then you consider San Francisco your home airport then?
Definitely, and unfortunately, I did actually move away shortly after the 747 retired. Sophomore year of high school, I moved on to Omaha, Nebraska, for my dad's work. But yeah, no, San Francisco holds a special place in my heart, and every time I go back there, it just doesn't seem right without the 747s.
Yeah, especially like British Airways now retiring theirs and Lufthansa grounding theirs for the time being. It sucks. It really does suck. So you've been taking aviation photos since 2013. And you use a little point and shoot camera. So let's talk about cameras then real quick. So we know you said you used your grandmother's little 2 megapixel point and shoot. So what have you used up to now, or kind of up to now? Like, kind of what's been the progression of that?
Yeah, so I had a little 2 megapixel point and shoot Canon camera, and I got that one in 2006. And then that one, it did stop working probably around 2010. And I would use my dad's camera if he had a DSLR camera, just a basic one. And then my first camera was a Nikon D3100. Had to stick with the Nikon that my dad had so we could share lenses and stuff. And then in 2015, I upgraded to the D7200. And then I realized, with doing aerial photography, that I needed something with a little bit of a bigger sensor. So I moved up to the D810, and then when the D810 came out, I moved up to the D850. So I've kind of gone through the whole Nikon line right there. But now I shoot with 2 Nikon D850s, and it's a little bit weird that not many photographers have 2 of the exact same cameras, but it's important in the helicopter that I have 2 of the exact same cameras. I take advantage of every single megapixel on the D850, which it has 47 of, which is awesome for aerial photography. So I can crop the heck out of some of the images that I post. But yeah, so with the D850, I take 2 D850s, and so I can use them interchangeably, and with cropping and stuff, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that you use 2 full-frame cameras, because a lot of people that, they not necessarily like air to ground like you do, but like the air to air stuff, they'll mainly have the crop body on them. So that's very interesting that you use 2 of the same full-frame cameras.
I just use 2 of the same full frames just to be able to get the little bit of extra distance. And I have thought about using a crop sensor, but I just haven't found the one that I've liked. And I got a really great offer on a used D850, which one I did purchase new and one I did get used. So it just made sense to go with the double D850, and then I can use them interchangeably as well, which makes a big difference. I don't have to think when picking the other one up, or think about it when switching lenses, because switching lenses in the helicopter is a challenging ordeal, and it's possible to do, but it takes a little bit of extra coordination and a little bit extra stress. But when I'm up in the helicopter, I like to be able to just switch in between them super fast. So it definitely makes a big difference.
I agree with that. I really do, and I understand that completely. But speaking of lenses, what lenses are you currently using? Have you used in the past?
Yeah, so I really started with the Tamron. I believe it was the 18 to 300, and I know I saved up for that one after my birthday after using some of just the basic Nikon kit camera lenses, and so that was my first spotting lens, I think, that I started using when I was 13, and then I moved up to the Tamron 150 to 600, which I actually used through last year. Awesome lens, totally recommend it. But I needed something with a little bit more a little bit more sharpness as I moved up with the D850 and had a full frame, and so I moved up to the Nikon 200 to 400 f4, which is my baby now, and I love the lens more than anything. It's a beautiful lens, and I also got a great deal on it as a used lens, and so that's been my main lens. And then I also use a 70 to 200 f2.8, and that's usually the lens that I use for the straight down shots. And then I also have a 14 to 24 f2.8, and I usually use those for wing views and such. And then I also have a 50 millimeter, a nifty 50, because you always got to have a nifty 50.
Always got to have the nifty 50, yeah. I got one in my bag. So that's pretty cool. So you use a wide variety of lenses with two of the, actually probably with the highest non-mirrorless bodies, I believe. Those are the largest censored or megapixel bodies that aren't mirrorless, I believe.
Yep, that is correct.
Yeah. Obviously, you take these amazing shots. Just off tangent real quick, kind of back to the air-to-ground stuff as you brought up, is for you, or how important for you is to get that angle right. Like, what is your favorite angle when you're doing this stuff? Because a lot of people have seen like the straight top down, and then like there's those epic onto the suns like Captain Orsted's flight. What for you? What angles for you like really get you going and like make you like, holy crap, like that was a really good string of shots?
So I would definitely say the top down shots of planes in the air is my favorite. So that really started it started at LAX when I would fly over the terminals. I would just love taking the top downs of, I think my first one was an A380, an Air France A380. I believe that, or a Lufthansa A380. I can't remember exactly. But then last summer in Anchorage, I planned out with ATC to be able to fly over the runway with an airplane coming in under us. And so we worked with ATC, we worked with the pilot beforehand to make sure that he was comfortable with what we were doing. And we lined up perfectly so that planes would fly right under us, and we had to make sure it was okay with the pilots. And we chose 2,200 feet AGL to make sure that we weren't interfering with any operations. So if the plane had to go around, they had ample space, which planes have gone around. There has been one that had to go around, and it just went straight under us, and we were no factor, and they knew we were there. But yeah, going back to my favorite is definitely the air to ground, and I think specifically there's a FedEx MD-11 and a UPS MD-11 and a Atlas 747 that were just my favorite, and they were from Anchorage. But doing the straight down of the plane's landing, that takes a little bit more coordination, and we have to make sure air traffic control is not busy, or I have to know the controller personally that makes sure they're comfortable with what we're doing and they know beforehand. That's usually not something that we can set up a few days before. That's usually a long time before, with a built-up relationship to make sure that air traffic controllers are comfortable with what we're doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you just show up with a helicopter and call it good. That's a lot of work. I mean, it's definitely. I mean, a lot of those shots, like, man, I'm surprised you're able to get that. But after listening to that makes a lot of sense now. As you take the time to let's coordinate, let's make sure everybody's good. If this feels uncomfortable, let's call it off. We're not going to do this. So that's really awesome that you take the time to really set it up and make sure that everybody does feel comfortable. And if they say no, they say no. That's the worst they can say. But it's been working out for you fantastically. that's pretty awesome to hear that that you do take the time to make sure everybody's going to do it safely. And in aviation, people that don't know or really aren't like working for an airline or anything like that, that is the number one thing is safety of people and the aircraft and the passenger. And so I'm really glad you do take that very, very seriously.
Definitely, yeah. There was actually a point where an air traffic controller wasn't comfortable with it, one of the supervisors at an airport, and he called me after. He was very upset with what we were doing, and it wasn't even a top-down shot. He was incredibly upset, and I had a follower who had reached out from the FAA, and we had them do an audit of all my work to make sure that we weren't breaking any rules, and we made sure that we were not breaking any rules. And he came back to me saying that nope, no rules were broken, that everything you do is safe. Even and of course, lots of people like to say that the top downs are unsafe, especially flying over the runway. But they're so well coordinated that I'd like to think they are completely safe, and the FAA did agree with us there. So yeah, it does. The helicopters do take a lot of work to set up, but I definitely pride myself in doing it the safe way and making sure that safety comes first at all times.
Awesome, that's great to hear. And hey, now you got the FAA on your side, so you now have the FAA card you can pull.
Exactly.
That is the top card. Like, hey, I don't care about your opinion. I have the FAA on my side, and that is the end-all, be-all right there.
Exactly.
So that's pretty cool, man. That's awesome. So let's move it on a little bit, dude. Let's talk about your favorite airport to go to. So besides San Francisco, which is your home airport, which we all can agree on, if you play by the rules at SFO, it's a great airport to go to. So besides SFO, what are other airports have you enjoyed going to? Not just to do your air-to-ground stuff, but just general outside the fence stuff.
Yeah, obviously LAX is one of the coolest airports in the world. There's airplanes going everywhere on Earth from that airport, and it's just so busy that there's airplanes moving every 20 seconds, and they're all heavies. So that's one of my favorites. I think scenically, Anchorage was definitely my favorite. It's just so beautiful. The air is so clean. It stays really cool up there. So even shooting a summer midday shoot, the light was not too intense, and then you didn't have to worry about a lot of heat haze, which was super sweet. JFK and Newark are other two really cool airports that I've been to, and then Louisville was also another really cool one that I was able to visit. So and then internationally, obviously Heathrow. I have not been there since they retired the 747s, but that was a really cool one. And then back in the summer, I got to visit Roswell, and there was, I think, 500 airplanes there at that point, and it was a humbling experience, to say the least. But getting just to walk around them and feel the scale of something that you can't see. You can't see COVID-19, but you can sure see the effects of it. So seeing COVID-19 and the effects of COVID-19 on the airline industry, just being able to visualize that a little bit better, and photographing it to help other people do the same, was a humbling experience, but it was also one of the coolest experiences that I've ever been able to go to. So and then, yeah, internationally, Sydney and London are two of my favorites to go to, just scenically beautiful airports.
Do you remember seeing the air-to-air stuff that the helicopter did with the Qantas 747 on its final scenic takeoff?
Oh man, that was beautiful. That was and I'm blanking on the photographer's name. Tim Bowery, I believe it is.
Tim Bowery, yeah, but they also it's not Tim, and also they actually did an actual TV station, did it perfectly. They were in a helicopter, with the video just perfectly going along with it. I'm like, that is the greatest 747 air-to-air footage of all time right there. Hands down.
Actually, funny story, I was on the other side of that. I was in Los Angeles, and we were supposed to catch it. I think it was an 8 a.m. arrival, and they did all the tour around Sydney, and then they also drew a 747, I think, in the sky, or a kangaroo.
Yeah, the kangaroo off the coast.
Yeah, and then everybody
thought it was diverting back to Sydney.
Yeah, and so I I was really worried that I was diverting as well, and that I was drawing a kangaroo. And the weather was actually terrible that morning in Los Angeles, and we couldn't take off in the helicopter to catch its final landings. I was there for its final landing and takeoff with Airways magazine, and we were deathly worried that we weren't going to get this shoot in, and luckily they did all the diversions and stuff and running around Australia, and it was late coming into Los Angeles, and we were able to get it perfectly. I guess not perfectly. It was still a little bit cloudy, but we were able to actually take off and get pictures of it. So, funny story about that. But yeah, they're extra thankful that it ended up doing all the extracurriculars.
I had the pleasure of spotting actually only one Qantas 747 in my life, and that was my only trip to LAX in 2015. Perfectly golden hour light coming in.
Oh.
That was it had the RB211s on it too. So like that was I very do much cherish that photo, and I really didn't understand night photography at that point, but you know how the Australian airlines, they'll go to remote their aircraft at a hard stand and they'll move them into the middle of the night back to the Tibet.
Yep.
So I have a photo of the Qantas 747. It's a little bit blurry, but they were pushing it out and towing it to the remote, and I got a really good head-on angle with the sunset behind it.
Oh,
towed out.
Doesn't get better than that.
I cherish that photo a lot just because of now the significance of that photo.
Oh, definitely.
It's also, you're not a true av geek until you spot it at LAX.
Agreed with that.
Talk about the Roswell stuff, and not just the Roswell, but you also went to Victorville to photograph not just a retired aircraft, but the aircraft that were sent to storage for COVID. As an airline employee, I walked around the Boise airport in April, actually spring break time, at between 1:30 and 2 p.m., and I was the only person in the terminal. There were no passengers, there was nothing. And it was so eerie to do that, to be the only person up there during the busiest scheduled time of the year, besides Christmas and Thanksgiving. So what you did to do those photos, for you, what was it like to see not just a retired aircraft on one side, but just lines and lines of aircraft that are ready to be put back in service? What was that like for you to do that?
Oh man, that was, having not traveled at all. I didn't do any traveling. I went back to Omaha, which was my home at the time, and I went back to Omaha for quarantine, which ended up being March, April, and half of May for me, and before I moved down to my dad in Atlanta. It was a humbling experience. So I did my first helicopter of stored airplanes, my first shooting of stored airplanes in Kansas City, and I did a helicopter above there, and it was a cloudy day, so we couldn't see it approaching, and it was a humbling experience seeing, like 60 airplanes just in a row, and there was, I think, more than 100 on the airfield that day. It was a humbling experience, and I know for a lot of people, it's hard to see. As I mentioned, it's hard to see COVID. It's not a virus you can see. You can't see it. So a lot of people have trouble visualizing things with it. And I think for me, coming to terms with it and what was going on, being able to capture it in aviation and being able to share it and show the effects of what was going on, I don't know, I guess helped me sort of deal with what was going on, and hopefully helped others deal with what was going on too. So I did a big series of stored airplanes, and while I was really sad to see them, I felt like it was really important that everyone, the world, sees these photos and what was going on in the airline industry and how badly it was hurting. So I think I did Kansas City, Roswell, I did Marana, Victorville, and Mojave didn't have any stored airplanes, I don't believe, but Mojave as well, and that's where a lot of the 747s were retired to, including the Qantas 747. So it was a humbling experience that I'm glad I was able to share, but it definitely evoked emotion.
You said that really well, as you can't visualize COVID, and us in the airline industry, we did. not just with the profits that were lost, but with the aircraft that were grounded. The TSA did like a little comparison between 2019 and 2020. The year prior in 2019, they screened like 2.5 million passengers. That day, they screened 86,000 passengers. Just to put it in perspective, this is unprecedented for the airline industry. The airline industry has never grounded fleets of aircraft. Like, this was, for geeks like us, this killed the 747.
Yep.
This is, like, there are very few airlines that will fly the 747 passenger. And cargo-wise, this was a rebirth for the 747 for cargo. But for passengers, it's little to done. But your photos, not just in Roswell, Victorville, whatever, it really rang home to a lot of people. Like, this is a big deal. And those photos, I think, were they're not just my favorites, but I think those are some of the most important photos you've taken. And in the aviation industry, those might be some of the most important photos that were taken in the whole of the aviation industry during that time. So, I mean, I really do commend you for doing that and actually wanting to go out and make these photos known and document these, because, you know, people in maybe 10 or 20 years are going to be asking people, like, you know, people that were around, you know, what was it like during that? And you could say, well, this is what it was like for the airlines, and you see the amounts of aircraft that were completely just, you know, stored, and a lot of them are still stored to this day right now. They've been stored for over a year now, and it takes a long time to get an aircraft back up to service. I don't think people realize there's a lot of stuff that has to go back on to get these planes back up in the air. So, but I really do commend you for taking the time to do that and to really do document those aircraft the way they are and that were in that state. But anyway, let's before we get really depressed and gloomy about COVID, let's move on, dude. So we talked about your favorite airports to go to, but this question is very similar. So, what is your favorite airplane to spot, and is it the same as your favorite airplane itself?
Yeah, I would say it is. I love the 747, and we touched on it before, but yeah, the 747 is becoming more rarer and rarer every day. I was lucky enough to be able to do a helicopter in Sydney and catch some Qantas 747s, and then catch the last one at LAX. And then going to Anchorage was really cool, being able to see so many cargo 747s with 8 or 10 being on the ramp at the same time. It was like unfathomable. I had never seen so many 747s at one place before. But yeah, definitely the 747. It's just a unique feel to the 747 with the upper deck and 4 engines. It's just a special plane to spot.
It really is, and I'm assuming that also is your favorite aircraft of all time as well as the 747. Yeah. Like I said, man, I think everybody in season 2, except for like 1 or 2 people, have said the 747 isn't their favorite. But I mean, like, are you not going to spot a 747 if it comes into your local airport? I mean,
you have to spot the 747 if it comes to your local airport. That's like a rule. AV Geek Rule 101.
Yeah, exactly. AvGeek Pilgrimage, LAX. AvGeek Rule number 1, spot the 747. I mean, that's. But our Idaho Air Guard deployed earlier in the year, April, May. We had 4 747s come in, and I know one came in like in the dead of night. I still went out there to go see it fly over my head. I'm not, especially with Boise, is the only time we'll get big traffic is when the Guard is gearing up for a deployment, and we had 4 747s come in, and then we had 3 C5s come in. And it's just like, this is awesome. Like, first of all, this is just I don't care if it's an all-white 747.
Any 747 is special.
It's just like, anytime there's like a big, heavy airplane coming in. Actually, United sent in a 777-300. That was really cool to see when the Guard came home. That was, I think, the first visit of a 777-300 since Boeing sent their test aircraft in here all those years ago. That was cool. I got some pretty cool access for the departure of that, which I'm not going to talk about, but that was really cool. That was super cool to do. Yeah. So the 747, being just a queen of the skies, a beautiful aircraft in general, and plus you growing up in San Francisco, that was 747 heaven. Did you ever get a photo of any of the 747 classics, like the 200s, at all?
So I do have a few, obviously from the Boneyard. I went to go visit them in Mojave, and there's quite a number of 747 classics there. And I do have one photograph of a Kalitta 747-200 at LAX, one of my first aerial photo shoots. I think it was in 2016, and I did get to see that one classic, but I believe that's my only photo of a classic, of an active classic, with the other ones all being stored in the Boneyard, unfortunately.
Have we got any of the Sands SPs?
I have not. That is one thing on my bucket list. Hopefully, Las Vegas helicopter, is in the cards for this year when traffic returns there a little bit more. So hopefully we'll be getting a Sands 747 SP at some point.
I would kill to get that's my unicorn aircraft as the SP.
Maybe we had to go down there together and do that. I don't know.
You heard it here, people. And on AvSP episode 20, you guys heard it here. I accept your invitation.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, dude. But I do like it's like back to LAX in 2015. This is when Kalitta was still running the 747-200, like right at sunrise to Honolulu. And I didn't have the car. I was with a friend of mine, and it was like taking off at perfect morning hours, like right by the Imperial Hill. And my friend didn't want to wake up for it, and I'm so angry because he never woke up for it. And then like a couple of weeks later, they retired. They retired the classic. And I'm like, oh my god. Yeah, but it's made up for it because, I'm a big DC-10 fan. I love the DC-10, and the 10 tanker sometimes will bring their DC-10s into Boise for fire season, especially for like fire inspections and all that. And I have actually been honored enough to go on to the actual tanker line and gone up in the not the 747, the DC-10s, and seeing the DC-10s, and these are unconverted DC-10s. So they saw the flight engineer and the steam gauges and all that. You can't beat a classic airliner. Like 727s. If the 727 comes into Boise tomorrow, I will go out of my way. Well, the 727 is the aircraft that got me into aviation. The story behind that, a real quick story, is in 2001 or 2002. It was me and my dad. We flew from Boise to Minneapolis on Northwest Airlines, and then on their new at the time A320s, and then we went MSP to Toronto. We usually flew either the DC-9s or the 727s out of the D gates in Minneapolis. I still remember this very well. There was a photo of me in the cockpit in Toronto, sitting in the cockpit of the 727. And the 727 for me has always been just that aircraft with the S duct and the T tail, and it's just been that aircraft. So we've got Air Horse 1 in Boise a few times, and I don't care how many photos I have of that aircraft. If it comes in, I'll be out there immediately tomorrow to go get it.
You can never take too many pictures of a classic.
You can't, especially right now when they're just getting so... Okay, I say that the DC-9 will go on forever. Like, the oldest DC-9 is like 54 years old and she's still going.
Yeah, like Maristar, they got those things running. They'll be running for another 50 years.
And also, I believe that the MD-80s, like the early MD-80 is also like parts interchangeability too. So, with American and Delta, MD-80 is sitting out there. I think there might be a couple spare parts lying around for her anyway.
Oh, so yeah.
That's just kind of cool. Like, the moral of the story is, if there's a classic airliner, go get them. They're not going to be around forever, and you will regret it. It's like the 737 NGs. It's like, it's an NG, and like maybe in like 40, 20, 30 years, we're going to be like, oh my gosh, it's a 737 NG. Now we're going to go out and try and get it. Anyway, let's move it on to, so we talked about 747s, bam. But do you have a least favorite aircraft to take a photo of, or is, like you said earlier, like every frame counts?
I think every frame counts. I take pictures of every plane that I see, especially in the helicopter and stuff. You never know when you need the photo again. If the registration becomes special, if there's a pilot flying that ends up contacting you. I've had a few pilots reach out, and they were flying, and I didn't take a picture of them. So even when CRJ 200s, I try to take as many pictures of them as possible, because you never know when you're going to make a pilot's day when you're able to capture his photo. So I definitely don't have a least favorite airplane. Capture everything we can. Luckily, we have digital cameras, so 256 gigabyte cards. You can take as many photos as you'd like.
That is very true, and it would help you out too to kind of get the settings just right to make that perfect shot as well.
Definitely.
So a lot of people have been coming on saying, every frame counts, because like the episode with Jordan Aarons, he said the exact same thing. He spots at Boeing Field, and we got a lot of business traffic up at Boeing Field, and he's that same way. He's like, you never know who that business jet guy is going to come in, and you're trying new things, and one day he might reach out to you saying, hey, I do have a photo, or no, I don't, I'm sorry. And then it kind of bums them out. So it definitely for you is, if you're in a helicopter, you don't have a lot of time. You need to make every shot count. You got to make those settings while you can to get the next big shot.
Exactly.
So, yeah, cool. What about the rarest aircraft you've ever taken a photo of?
Rarest airplane I've ever taken a photo of? I have a couple pictures of DC-3s. Oh, I guess I probably have it. Funny story, when I was in Miami, we took pictures of every single Boeing airplane ever made, except for the one that's I guess you can call it a fake Boeing, the 717. So seeing the 707, we got to see an Omega tanker 707, which frustratingly took off about 30 minutes after we landed in the helicopter, which would have been it would have been perfect. But you can't capture everything. But I got a straight down shot of that. I don't think I've posted yet. But yeah, probably the 707. That has to be the rarest airplane I got. And I don't think there's many out there with the original JT 3D engines still on them. And that Omega tanker did have its original JT 3D engines on it. So I wish I would have been able to capture that one air to air. That would have been super sweet. But I got a pretty special picture of it from the top down, and I think that would go down as one of my rarest. I've also gotten pictures of some Convair 880s, but those were in the boneyard, so I'm not sure those count as active airplanes. So they're while they are very rare, I guess they weren't as special to capture as an active 707.
The active 707, just hands down. I guess the 707. It's
over 50 years old. So yeah, easy the rarest airplane that I've captured.
The Omega one has teased me a couple times. It flies out of Fallon to support Top Gun out of Fallon, and it's gone to the ranges. It's actually gone to the Mountain Home Range once south of where I live, and it's circled in there, and I'm going like, should I get my camera ready? Should I stay home?
Waiting for it.
I've actually seen one of the two, believe it or not. I actually got my only helicopter thing that I've done is I was up in helicopter on July 15th, 2016. If you know that date, you know the story I'm about to tell. If you don't know the date, that's the day Boeing celebrated their 100th anniversary. I flew up from Boise that day, and a spur-of-the-moment thing, my buddies and I, we got a helicopter, and we shot the Boeing flight line 7.0 through 7.8.
No way!
All in the line. So we had Omega 7.8, Delta 717, the United 727 they restored, flew down there, parked her, and then towed her back out on the line, 727. The Alaska 100-year strong 737, a Cathay Pacific 747-8, a United 757-200, which they flew from Roswell up there just for the event, and then flew it back and then scrapped it. A brand new FedEx 767, a brand new Emirates 777-300ER, and then this is really cool. This was an ANA 747. Sorry, not ANA 747, ANA 787-9-9, and that was the Boeing Farnborough aircraft for that year. So it's really cool is they actually only had the line up for a couple hours, and then they broke the line because they had to get the 747 back to Payne because its customer flight was the next day for Cathay Pacific. And then they had to get, so the line was only up for a amount of time, and man, that's if not my best spotting day ever, just because I was
easy.
Not just being in the helicopter with some good friends, but just seeing everybody out there just giddy and like school kids and like, holy crap, like the running joke is they probably had to go dust off that 707 tow bar because it hasn't been used in years.
Oh, easily.
That was so cool to do, and I still that was just the people there that day made it worth it. And that 747 departure was right at sunset too. You can ask for a better 747 departure. And then they flew that freaking 757 back to be scrapped. It's like, dang, keep it at the museum. But that was like my only helicopter experience, and it was just absolutely amazing to do. But yeah, that 707, dude, I agree, is epic. And if you think about it too, look at the Air Force 707s. The ones with the TF-33s, the military version, is the E8 J Stars, which is based out of somewhere in Georgia. Sorry, I don't know the actual base. Don't come after me, listeners. And then the Century still has and the OC-135, which is the Open Skies 135, and then I think a weather one. But they still have the TF-33s, the military version. But those KC-135s are built in the 50s and the early 60s. Those are going to go on forever and ever. So the 707, if you think about it too, the 707 the actual airframe itself is still being used today in the 737. It's the same cockpit dimensions as a 707, a 737. So, technically the 7L still does live today in the 737.
I didn't realize that. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, if you think about it, so the thing about this, if you look at just a regular cockpit view, take a 707 with a 727 and a 737. And you could use a Max or an NG or a Classic or whatever. But if you look at those, the cockpit dimensions are almost identical. Yeah, think about that. The 7L is still technically living today.
No kidding. That is really cool. A little bit of aviation history for you there.
Hey, that's your random aviation fact of the day. So, on the tail end of that, before we go off on an extreme tangent with that, because we can go down a rabbit hole really well with that, what favorite events, if you have one, like an air show, whatever, or like a different location outside of general airport spotting, have you done or do you enjoy?
Well, my favorite one is definitely the goodbye that I got to give one of my best friends and my mentor, Captain Ted Orris. We planned a helicopter for his final flight, and that definitely takes it as my favorite experience around the airport.
Just real quick, I don't know if that was going to be your spotting story, but just real quick, can you just give us a little background on that and kind of how you made that happen, if you want? Yeah,
so it started earlier that summer when Captain Ted told me he was retiring, and he told me not to tell anybody that he didn't want a retirement party or anything, and we were in the midst of the pandemic, so we couldn't really have a goodbye for him, and I was just starting up school, so I wasn't able to fly, and I felt horrible that I wasn't going to be able to be there for one of my best friends and my mentor as he took to the skies one final time, and that I was never going to get to fly behind him. And so while I didn't get to fly behind him, I wanted to surprise him with a goodbye, and he'd always wanted to do a helicopter with me or get photographed in a helicopter. And so I got all his final flight information, and I drove up a few hours from Atlanta to Raleigh, where I had planned a helicopter, and it ended up that he got delayed in I think it was Birmingham. There was severe weather that weekend down south. I think it was a tail end of a hurricane that came through, and so we were worried that we we're going to get him. And then I got a flat tire on the way to the airport, so I almost missed the shoot entirely after driving up all those hours to get him. And then we ended up that it was perfect. It was right in the golden hour, and then it started clouding over. And Captain Ted still didn't even know that we were doing this, and I was kind of texting him throughout the day. I was like, "Oh, I'm going to track you on Flight Radar. I'm get some screenshots and post on my story." And he had no idea. And then when we got up over the airport, I texted him, and I just told him to look up and wave. And he was like, "What?" And he looked up, and sure enough, I was up there in the helicopter taking pictures of him, and he didn't really fully get what was going on, but we got pictures of him pushing back and got him waving from the cockpit. And then he sort of did a wing wave on departure. His final departure, he got a heading that was to the left of the runway, and so he did a perfect little wave as he departed one last time. And I think that's where the photo of the first officer actually waving as Ted was the one who was flying on the left side. So his pilot was on the right side. His co-pilot was on the right side, and we got pictures of him waving as they took off one final time. And it ended up that the delay was perfect, and the clouds broke for maybe 30 seconds. And he took off in a beautiful golden hour, and we got that shot that I think quite a few people have seen by now, and that was definitely my most special moment in aviation so far. And then getting to the ground and getting to send him the pictures, and him being completely surprised that we had set that all up with his good friend, and that you could hear us on ATC and hear the surprise in his voice when he asked us if that was Ryan up there. So yeah, definitely the most memorable and special experience that I've gotten around the airport.
That is so special, and it's going out of your way to do something like that for Captain Ted. I mean, it's only shared by Southwest social media. I mean, it's like, how much bigger can you get like that? Especially like they even show you the photo of like he printed out and stuff like that. And I didn't realize that he had no idea this was happening. I completely thought that it was completely like set. Like everybody knew this was going to happen. I didn't realize he had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, so yeah, he had no idea that it was coming, and we completely surprised him. And he was like, "Wait, I told you not to do anything special," and it ended up being super cool. And no one even picked up on it actually at first. It was a super special experience, and obviously didn't do it for Instagram or something. I just did it for him, and I just shared the experience because I enjoyed it. And then a few months later, like 4 months later, at the end of November, I posted it on Twitter. I had just gotten to Twitter, and it blew up on Twitter. It got like 4,000 retweets. I think that's what they're called. I'm still new to Twitter, and and that's where the story blew up. And then Fox News and CNN and USA Today were asking to do interviews all of a sudden, and that's when the story kind of broke on what was happening, and kind of just a fun, feel-good story to end the year out. But yeah, that was definitely a special experience.
A year of doom and gloom and just melancholy with COVID, that I think really made a difference, not just for Captain Ted, but for a lot of other people. Like, that's really a feel good in aviation, and the aviation industry really needed to feel good after last year. Like that wasn't fun. It was brutal. It sucked, to be honest, but that was a really good feel-good story. I'm so glad that happened, and I'm so glad that made national headlines like it should have. And that's just so amazing that you did that for a friend like that. And man, that's so awesome, dude. I'm just speechless with that story, hearing it from you. But that's pretty awesome. Actually, you know what? What is like another spotting story? I mean, you got the Captain Ted one, but do you have another like special event or kind of something that really is really close to you that you would like to share with the listeners out there?
I think I've shared both of them. Getting to do my first professional photo shoot with United Airlines, that was a really special moment. Getting my first repost with an airline, that was really cool. And then getting to line up the 787 Dreamliners down in LAX with United Airlines. We lined up the 787 8, 9, and 10. They hired me for that shoot, brought me out there. We were taking pictures of the new Polaris business class, and then also of the 787 family members lined up. And then we worked with Boeing a little bit for that, and then getting to do a photo shoot of behind the scenes with Fly Nigh on, and getting to give away a helicopter ride. That was another really special one. But there's been so many special stories out there, and those are just to name a few of my favorite. I think I've been lucky enough to experience some pretty special things. But yeah, those were two of the favorite. And I guess I was tipped off about the Delta MD-80 send-off from a friend at Delta Airlines, and we stayed up. We knew when the schedule was updating and when the flight was going to come out, and we stayed up the entire night. We were up till 4 a.m. and refreshing every 5 minutes, and it finally got released, and we all got seats on the MD-90, which happened to probably be the final MD-90 flight with passengers ever. And that was a really special experience. And of course, I would have loved to be on a final 747 too, but being on the final flight of a type that will never fly passengers again was knowing you're the last person to ever sit in that seat was a special experience. And then I also got to shoot the American MD-80 send-off, where I was on the media flight shooting for American Airlines that day, and flying MD-80 from Dallas to Roswell on, it was, I believe, September 4th, September 3rd, 2019. We like to refer to it as like the day that the world was never the same. Everything went downhill after the MD-80 send-off.
That's very accurate. Yes. The MD-80. Yeah.
After American. That was the time the world was normal, and we need to bring them back, and the world will return to normal. But yeah, that was another really special experience. So,
American, if you're listening, you know what we need to do. Bring them back. Not just for aviation geeks, because God, it's not us that want them back. It's the world will be a right place. But dude, the Delta MD-90, I tried so hard to be on that flight. The reason is when I worked for a contractor in Boise, we used to get the MD-90 every night from Minneapolis. And I took so many photos of that aircraft. I have video of me pushing out the MD-90. I have actually Airliners World offered me a cover photo for their for the MD-90 or for the Delta Mad Dog retirement. They wanted to use one of the night shots. I have a complete night shot lit up, head-on view, clean. The issue is I can't really, because conflict of interest inside the fence. I don't work for that company anymore. It's just still for me that's an ethics line I'm not going to cross. But I have so many photos of that Mad Dog, and it was so sad because I remember the last Mad Dog that I brought in, and I was like, it's a very bittersweet moment. A lot of people never really liked working the Mad Dogs because of how the bins were. I didn't mind it at all. I enjoyed every moment I worked in MD-90. And actually, we got the 90s because it was a distance, so they rather used the B2500s, so the JT-ADs on them. They actually subbed in an 88 one night, and I was like, holy crap! The MD-90 is a Mad Dog, but the ones with the JT-ADs are the Mad Dog, and that was such a great night. I was drooling over that airplane, man. I think I might need I got to go back so I can find my photos. We pulled the jet bridge back that night to move it, but I might do a comparison photo with the MD-90 head on, the MD-88 head on. I think I need to do that. Maybe stay tuned, listener. Yeah, I mean, there were some rumors I heard that some cargo companies wanted to buy them as freighters.
I believe some of the MD-88s will be getting a new life, but they were ferried to Victorville, and I believe there's some sort of deal with the lease backs on the lease on with Boeing. So I'm not sure if they're getting a new life. I heard rumors about that too, so I'm not sure if they're getting a new life or it's just a movement of retirement. But either way, it's cool to see them moving out again.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see like an Everett's MD-90. That'd be really cool.
That would be really cool.
Actually, speaking of Everett's, while you're up in Alaska, did you get shots of the DC-6?
I did get shots of the DC-6. Unfortunately, I didn't get any pictures of them flying. They were not flying the day that I was moving. They usually fly early in the mornings, and I was up in the late evening, just due to the sunset and all the 747s moving, which were my main goal on that trip. But I did get some Everett's MD-80s, and I got the Everett's MD-80 prototype, which was kind of a cool thing. It was an ex-American Airlines MD-80. So that was kind of a cool experience. But we did get a picture of the DC-6. It was just on the ground. They were doing some maintenance on it. So getting a picture of an MD-80 next to a DC-6, two generations of Douglas, only 30 years apart, I believe, 35 years apart. So another unique picture that I have.
Wow.
I don't think I posted that, but definitely a cool comparison for an AV geek.
Man, dude, Douglas built them right, and those Douglas aircraft, the DC-3 will go on to be 100 years.
Easy.
The hands down. The DC-3, variants of the MD-80 will. What's actually cool is I got that same Everett's MD-83 in Boise, actually. Came up.
Oh, no way.
Oil. Yeah, it was oil, taking oil equipment from Texas, had a fuel stop in Boise, and was going to Fairbanks. That was really cool. I remember that night, too. It was cold. It was rainy and cold that night, but the clouds broke just at the right time, so I got a really cool ramp shot of her. But anyway, dude, it's so awesome that you're able to do all this. And just a couple last questions is, what tips or words of encouragement do you have for the listener out there?
Yeah, I would say just finding the unique angle. It's really not about your camera equipment. I think finding unique angles to take pictures of airplanes, whether it's through the fence, from above, right next to them, inside them, just using your different backgrounds to, whether it's the snow or really anything, just being creative with what you do, and finding a community out there. I know it was super cool to find an aviation community online, especially on Instagram and stuff. But yeah, just keep to it. Learn how to edit, learn Lightroom and Photoshop, and just keep at it.
Yeah, simple as that. Try new angles, try different things, do hard things. Make it work. It'll pay off in the future. One last couple questions before we really start wrapping her up here is, where can a listener find your work? You talk about airliners and jet photos and stuff. Well, airliners mainly, sorry. But there's also a certain other Instagram that people might know you from. So let's take it away, man.
Yeah, you can probably find me on Instagram as DiecastRyan. There's a long story behind that, where the username comes from. But I also have a website, Ryan Patterson Photography, where I also have a profile on Airliners.net. I think rFlyer is the username on there. So yeah, you can find me on either one of those, and I try to post daily on DiecastRyan. So come join me on there.
Absolutely. And real quick, what is the story behind DiecastRyan?
I always enjoy explaining it. But so I actually started taking pictures of model airplanes, and that's where the aviation account started. So DiecastRyan comes from the diecast model airplanes that I used to collect when I was younger. And I no longer have a model airport, but I used to have a model airport, and I used to take pictures of them. We wouldn't travel that much. And I loved being around aviation, so I always wanted to be posting pictures of it, and I didn't have that many since I hadn't had a camera for that long. And so I had a model airport with like the little Gemini jets and Phoenix models airplanes that I used to collect, and I would take pictures of those, and I put it up on Instagram, and that's how I spent my first two and a half years on Instagram. And then when I started getting into photography and eventually aerial photography, that's when I slowly phased it out. But I couldn't never change the name, so that's where DiecastRyan comes from.
That's pretty awesome, man, as you can't ever stop aviation and love for aviation. So if I scroll back through all your 2000 photos on Instagram, I might be able to find the original DiecastRyan photos then.
You will definitely be able to find the original DiecastRyan photos. The originals end in around 2016, but there's you'll see a big change in the work. I guess I've kind of grown up with this account. It's one of the only things that stayed the same through the past 7 years now that I've had the account. So it's there. You can scroll back a while and you should find some model airplane photos.
Yeah, if you scroll back on mine, and you might see some really crappy photos from when I started out.
There's some pretty crappy photos on mine too. Lots of iPhone photos.
We have to start somewhere, and we've all started there, and
exactly.
It's going to happen. People out there thinking it won't happen. Well, you're going to hone your skills. You're going to hone your camera gear. You're going to learn how to edit, and you're going to be as good as him one day, as Ryan one day, if not better. So anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Aviation Spotters Podcast. And as always, guys, if you know anybody who you think you would love to come talk aviation with me here on the AvSP, you guys know how to reach me. Shoot me a DM on Twitter at BOISpotter, Instagram at BOISpotter. Send us an email, aviationspotterspodcast@gmail.com. Check out the Facebook page, guys. Shoot me a message on there if that's easier for you. Also, please remember, we are up on YouTube. All episodes will be up on YouTube. They're not really that fancy, but they're up there on YouTube. So if you know anybody who doesn't have the normal means of listening to the podcast, and they do have YouTube, please point them to the YouTube channel. That is a great tool for people who don't have a lot of the ways to listen to like some people do. And also, guys, use the hashtags. Hashtag Aviation Spotters Podcast and hashtag AvSpottersPod. You guys use those hashtags on your photos or other people's photos. That gives me a good way to see who's out there and see who we can get on next on the show. But anyway, that's going to do it for me here on another episode of the AvSP. Ryan, did anything else to add before we sign her off?
No, thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to interacting with you guys on Instagram or on my website.
Awesome. And Ryan, just real quick, I want to take a moment to thank you again. You're such an amazingly humble and kind person, taking the time to do this. And I really, really, really do appreciate it. And thank you so much for just being a super, super nice and humble guy. And that's going to do it for me here on another episode of the Aviation Spotters Podcast. And as always, keep those batteries charged and those cameras ready. We'll catch you on another episode of the Aviation Spotters Podcast.